Hello everyone, welcome to the newest episode of Heal Thyself. Thank you for joining the show as always. Appreciate your time, appreciate your willingness and openness to learn new subjects you may have not known about. Going into product reviews with an open mind, and then also distinguishing for yourself and empowering yourself what you want to do, and then opening your hearts to the amazing guests that we have with information that one may not resonate with you, but actually plant some seeds for you, but also things that can really empower us. So today, really important episode because I'm going to be speaking about cell phones, the effect that cell phones have, how addicted are we to cell phones, the effects that they have on us and our children, which are much more than you may think. So after this knowledge bomb, you're going to be looking into how much you're using a cell phone and how much your children may be, and then how to reduce them. I'll give you some really good tips. And then an awesome guest, one of my close friends, one of the most creative people I know on the planet, Nick Onken. He's an incredible creative, but also he's going to speak about his method and to how he increases his creativity and how cell phones and electronics mess up his creative flow. All right, so without further ado, let's get into that knowledge bomb. All right, electronic addiction, in particular phones, all right? So since the advent of cell phones, we've been exposed to this new stimulus, right? Not necessarily one we evolved with at all, but our brain and our physiology has to adapt, as it always does, to survive, adapt to this new stimulus. But this new stimulus is unprecedented because it's something that we are stimulated by every single day, all day. Most of us, right? So the brain's still adapting to this level of consumption, and it's an unnatural level of consumption. Additionally, we are giving this overstimulus, overconsumption of apps, which are designed to keep us there and make us addicted. And also this blue wavelength that we're getting from electronics is affecting our health overall. And we'll learn a little bit about that later in this knowledge bomb. I'll speak about it. But in the last show, if you listened, Matt Maruka spoke about the importance of blocking those blue wavelengths. So I'm going to talk about why that's really important in the context of us and our children too, right? So it's our eyes consuming this wavelength, and it's also our brain being affected by it, all right? So you may have heard of this term. It's called nomophobia, right? It's not an official DSM term recognized in the research, but nomophobia is no mobile phobia, right? When you're not with your mobile phone, that fear, the anxiety that comes from being away from it, right? So according to the Pew Research Center, this is a study back in 2015, showed that 46% of Americans cannot live without a smartphone. They were already addicted back in 2015. And I'm gonna link this really cool website. It's called Bank My Cell. This is a organization which has a whole section on smartphone addiction where you can check up on up-to-date research, but they have an awesome breakdown or infographic about a lot of these statistics. So I'm going to read you some of these statistics that might blow your mind. People check their phone 47 times per day minimum, but that can go up to hundreds of times per day. Think about how many times a day you unlock your cell phone and then you open up an app. You'd be shocked if you started counting. So 85% of us will check the device while speaking to family and friends. How many of you have been guilty of that? I have. But let's be more cognizant of how often we're using our cell phone around loved ones, all right? The average user will tap, swipe, and click their cell phone 2,617 times per day. I had no idea I'd do anything in the day other than think more than 2,000 times a day. So it's pretty incredible, or breathe, but it's pretty incredible how we're up there just with our thumb and what we're doing. So it's wild when I learned that statistics. 47% of those folks will try to limit usage, okay? Cognizantly going, I want to limit my usage, but only 30% succeed on average. And I'll give you some more tips to succeed so you put yourself in that 30% or more, okay? The average amount of time we spend on cell phones is 2 hours and 51 seconds per day, but I feel like that's even on the low end, especially if you're working on it, especially if you're on Instagram all the time posting and part of your work is on Instagram. So for me, I know that because I do a lot of work on Instagram, my average time is way more than 2 hours and 51 seconds a day. It's more towards 4 hours or so. I have a timer on my phone that tells me how long I've been on Instagram, and it cuts me off at 3 hours. Usually that hits at night, but sometimes I'm on there more in the day and it comes on earlier, but we can do that. I'll tell you how. 47% of parents say their child is addicted to their phone. And we have negative effects on distraction in school and their overall behavior, right? Technology and screen time basically rewires brains, particularly in children's brains. And it appears that when you have increased screen time, that neglects the circuits in the brain that control the more traditional methods of learning, like reading, writing, and concentration, right? The old school ways that we consumed through reading, writing, and concentration, now they're being rewired to adapt as we do incredibly as human beings, we adapt to the new stimulus, which is overtaking that. And as a result, we're seeing increases in distractions at school. So 27% increase in depression in 8th graders who are heavy users of social media. And teens who spent over 5 hours a day on their phone had a 71% increase in suicide versus those who spent 1 hour. And also those who spent 5 hours a day had 51% reduction in sleep. So let's think about not only us, but our kids, or our kids in the family who are teens who are using the cell phone. And if they have any of this disrupted sleep, trouble in school, think about if it got worse once they started really using their cell phone over the past 5-10 years, okay? So as far as cell phone consumption, US is number 3 behind China and number 1 Brazil. So here are some tips. Let's look for warning signs first and foremost. Think about this. You can't keep off your cell phone when you're conversing with someone. That's a major warning sign, right? You have the impulse to grab it even when you're with someone, or let's say we sat down for an hour. Will you have the impulse to pick up your phone? And then ultimately, will you pick up your phone? You have trouble concentrating, or you can't finish work or chores, right? You set out to clean up your whole living room or kitchen and you check your phone 5-10 times, right? You become forever distracted by your cell phone or wanting to check it, that distraction in itself. You begin to experience sleep problems. You need to be on your phone, or otherwise you have mood changes, right? Anxiety or irritability. You have the fear of missing, right? That you're missing something when you're not on your phone. And then you mask your phone usage. You go to the bathroom while at work just to check your phone. These are all warning signs that you're suffering from nomophobia. I sound like a pharmaceutical commercial, but yeah, these are warning signs because it's showing us that our brain is being rewired to the stimulus of the cell phone, which is ultimately affecting our whole physiology, our overall health. And we don't even know the conditions of what happens long term, right? The implications of what we're going to see. It's fairly recent, the advent of cell phones. So I just want us to all be cognizant now, all right? So here are some of the few statistics and studies that blew my mind. I got some more for you. Tiger Mobile it has a nice article on some of the studies that they link on it. MIT did a study a few years ago, and they said when they just took the cell phone away from the subjects for 24 hours, the majority of them were already expressing anxiety and confusion, right? And other studies show the same thing. And also other studies were showing that this manifests for folks even in physical changes like increased prolonged blood pressure changes. So a really interesting one, in the Radiology Society of North America, they found an imbalance in brain chemistry in folks who were addicted to their cell phones, right? It's a small study, and they had 19 subjects, right, with an average age of 15 and a half. And these subjects were diagnosed with internet or smartphone addiction. So not only did we see the subjects with the highest score on the survey, and it's a standardized survey, the highest score of smartphone addiction having symptoms of more depression, anxiety, insomnia, and impulsivity, but we also saw a change in the brain scan, right? So what we're seeing is a change in the brain chemistry, the neurochemistry, okay? Now we have neurotransmitters in our brain, and you heard me speak about GABA, and you might have heard me speak about glutamate. GABA and glutamate are sort of antagonistic neurotransmitters. GABA is a more calming neurotransmitter where, you can take a GABA supplement and it's actually indicated for relaxation. And glutamate is the more excitatory one. Glutamate is the one where parts of our brain are signaling to each other, how cells signal to each other. It's involved in almost every excitatory function in our brain, right? So now you have two antagonistic neurotransmitters. What we see is that there is actually an imbalance in the ratio of what is signified as healthy or normal. We see a disproportion in the ratio of these amino acids. And it's called the anterior cingulate gyrus, that part of the brain which is involved in empathy, impulse, control, emotion, and decision making has an imbalance. So now we're seeing these very emotions or brain inputs being compromised by just using cell phone in an addicted fashion. And I think the biggest problem is the children who especially have the smaller brains, but having the same amount of exposure, they're getting a disproportional amount of stimulus from the cell phone to their smaller developing brains, right? So without going into brain cancers or EMFs, which is actually in itself a whole show, which I will do. Again, let's recall the last show where Matt was talking about the blue light wavelength and what it does to the brain. Not only does it reduce or disrupt normal hormone function, but also we're seeing changes in the brain. Now, there was a landmark study by the National Institute of Health, and this was a $300 million study. And basically what they were doing is MRI scans that track brain changes in children who use their cell phone with varying amounts of time. So the children who use their electronic screens more than 7 hours a day had profound changes to the prefrontal cortex of the brain. This is important now, right? Because that part of the brain is involved in complex cognitive behavior. What's that mean? Planning, speech, logical reasoning, decision making, personality expression. So all of a sudden, the children with prolonged usage of cell phones have actually a reduction in this part of the brain, in the volume of it, right? So all of a sudden, this part of the brain, which controls basically our internal goals into thoughts and action, is being affected by children with increased cell phone usage or electronic screen usage versus the kids who are using it just 2 hours a day. It's incredible. The brain is actually adapting to the stimulus and not for the better. So I want to go over some behavioral criteria which would help identify smartphone addiction. And up to date, this is the most accurate criteria. It was published in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry by Y.H. Lin and their group. So in this, I want us to pay attention and see if we fall into these criteria. And I'll tell you how many we need to fall into, but let's start off with this. Continued inability to resist the impulse of the usage of the smartphone. Symptoms of dysphoria, anxiety, irritability after a period of withdrawal use, using the cell phone for a period of time longer than intended, persistent desire and or unsuccessful attempts to quit or reduce smartphone usage, heightened attention to using or quitting smartphone use, and persistent smartphone use or despite recurrent physical or psychological consequences, okay? See if you fall into any of those. Now, here are the functional criteria. Excessive use resulting in persistent or recurrent physical or psychological problems, use in a physically hazardous situations like driving or crossing the street, or any other ones that have negative impacts on daily life, use that impairs our social relationships or performance at school or work, and lastly, use that is very time-consuming, which is causing us significant stress. Now, the diagnosis rests upon the presence of 3 or more of the main criteria, which are the ones I mentioned before, of those 6, and 2 or more functional criteria, the ones I just mentioned. So C, 3 or more of the main criteria, 2 or more of the functional criteria, if we fall into any of those. If we do, then it might be time for us to start making interventions or seeking help. And there are groups out there which can help support reduction in cell phone usage, and I'll talk about a few things that I suggest, but also you can do an online test if you're unsure about these criteria. There are some online tests which will help guide you more. So here's some of the solutions, okay? It's what works for me, but certainly things that we can start putting into practice for ourselves and our children, all right? So I speak a lot about rituals, and in my rituals, I do not use my phone in the morning or at night. So let's say I take 2 hours in the morning and 1 hour at night, that's 3 hours of no cell phone uses. That's already cutting it in maybe, let's say, a third, which is really powerful, right? So 80% of the people are checking their cell phone before bed, and 35% of people are checking it 5 minutes before bed. So for us, what we can do is turn on that red light feature. There's a red light feature actually where you you set it up, and then when you to activate it, you would triple click the side of your phone. But go online, and it's in the settings, but you can do a red light feature where all of a sudden, come nightfall, you activate that and your phone is not releasing the blue waves like it does when the feature's not on. Also, I will use the red light feature. I'll activate it during the day when I know I don't want to be using my cell phone or distracted by the cell phone, because it's hard to really enjoy a lot of these apps when the red light feature is on. So I think that all of us should be putting on that red light feature every single night. Timers, I mentioned the timer. There's one that I have for Instagram, which alerts me when it's been 3 hours, but also you can look at your cell phone usage on your phone throughout the week, every day of the week, and then it'll compare it to the week before. So you can see the trend if you're an analytics person. Set up a dopamine detox day or a few times during the month where you get off of your cell phone. I'm not going to go into that because our guest will be speaking about this. So he's going to talk about all his tactics that he uses to optimize his creativity and reduce that those dopamine hits that he gets from the phone. Think about day and night blockers. Now this is really, really powerful because I think this is one of the major answers to getting off your cell phone or reducing cell phone addiction, even if you have kids. So, again, Matt came for the last episode. He is the founder of Raw Optics, which I do believe is the best blue blockers out there, or one of the best. And the day and night blockers will be helpful because if you use the yellow glasses during the day, it'll reduce that blue light wavelength. It'll block it actually, but it'll keep the other wavelengths that you need during the day. And then when you put the orange ones on at night or the red ones on at night, it'll block completely all of the blue light and any other stimulating light that you don't need. So really important that is if during the day you're working on a computer or you're in front of your tablet or you're always on your phone or you just watch a lot of movies, that you have those yellow light day blockers on. The night ones we already know, I talked about so much, but you got to get those day ones in. This is really going to help reduce that wavelength into the brain that's affecting the brain physiology. It's not going to reduce the stimulus. The stimulus is going to be there, especially the impulse to open up an app. That won't be reduced, but it'll help reduce the negative effects of that wavelength. So really important, okay? So for kids, they absolutely should not be having their cell phone near their head, adults too. So try using speakerphone or even headphones, especially never in children. It's really important that they're not using that phone near their head because they have the developing brain and it's going to be near their temporal and frontal lobes, which can have, we don't even know the effect that it can have in young children with developing brains for cell phones. I want to do the EMF show, so that will be coming up. So, and I'll talk about a little bit about that more. Children under 2 should never be on cell phones. They shouldn't play on cell phones. They shouldn't even be using screens. Try to reduce that as much as you can. Increase play for face-to-face time. Make sure you have that time and get the children out in nature instead of games. I know this is obvious, but it's not practiced by many people. Not like the way it used to be when I was a kid, okay? All screens should be used less than 2 hours a day because in those studies we saw that children who were using it 5+ hours a day had the really negative effects versus the ones that were using it 2 hours a day. So I think we should cap it at 2 hours a day to be reasonable. So, having the timing on for a children's cell phone or iPad or whatever they're using. And when they are on the phone, try to encourage the usage of more learning apps and the ones that really distract them. And again, encourage family connection, build that family community, especially at the dinner table. Don't allow the cell phones. And keep them out of the bedroom. These are quick interventions that we can make, but it'll make a major difference in our health and our children's health. So I really hope that helped. Some crazy statistics. I was really shocked at some of them that I found. So again, easy stuff that we could start doing. Get your blue blockers. Be aware of how much you're using your phone. Put some timers on it, and pay attention to how much your child is using the phone, and if it has affected their schoolwork or their sleep or their behavior or their mood, as well as yours. All right, special guest time. This guy Nick Onken is going to go into creativity, going into dopamine detoxes, going into masculine, feminine, spirituality, everything that you want in an interview. We're going to have from this professional, creative mind. Let's get into that special guest segment. All right, everyone, the special guest today, a real friend of mine. He's amazing at what he does. I always talk about the importance of creativity in the context of our health, right? And a lot of us don't tap into our creative selves. So it just so happens that I have the creative guru on here, Nick Onken. He's a photographer, but also he's a creative alchemist. I don't know what that means. We're going to ask him, but you may have seen that hat that I wear that says Heal Thyself on it. He's a creator of that. So Nick Onken, without further ado, man, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. It's nice because we're friends in real life.
Yeah.
And you're here in LA for like the first time in this whole quarantine.
Yeah.
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 And so how does the energy feel here versus New York? Because you're from Williamsburg. What's here? Like, is it different?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall energy is there's similarities in the terms of like the overall pandemic that's happening.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you're in your own pockets, you create, and if you're creating your own energy within that, so like we all hang out in a similar vibe of tribe and people. And I think that creates and breeds its own energy in and of itself. So I don't really feel like I actually feel more alive here because like a lot of my tribe is here. Now I think all my tribe has like left New York. I mean, it's like mass exodus from New York. It's crazy.
Shit. I think we may see a little mass exodus out of LA too. It's crazy.
I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that Austin is like the game.
That's a new place to go. All right. Well, so you mentioned like putting yourself next to how important is it to have a quote unquote tribe or like people that you resonate with in the context of your creativity?
Well, I mean, life is about the people you meet and the things that you create with them, right? And I think that tribe and who you surround yourself with is absolutely key. And your surroundings, I mean, that goes all the way from, I mean, I like to curate and create my own apartment, my own like space, because what you absorb, what comes in. So it goes the same way with people, right? If you create and curate the people that you hang out with, you're constantly absorbing, right? The whole mirror neuron thing. I really believe that that's so huge. So I think creating the tribe and, creating that environment and people that you hang out with, it just raises your energy, raises your creative inspiration, it raises my creative inspiration. And, that's why I like to hang out with so many creative people, like entrepreneurs, creatives, everyone like you. And I think just that synergy creates this like just a massive, up-leveling.
Yeah, because you're always inspired continuously. And I always tell like the viewers and listeners, are you intentionally bringing people into your life who inspire you, right? Or are they like anchors that are totally bringing down not only your creative self, but your health, your mental well-being? So I think you're very intentional about who you bring into your life. And do you have a criteria where you're like, okay, intentionally speaking, or do you just feel it? You're like, oh, wow, this person is a good vibe.
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, we always have we'll talk about the masculine, feminine later, but I think I always, I believe that creativity starts with intention. So it's creating the world around you, right? And as you think, as you create that. So it's really being intentional of who you pull into your circle and who you let in, who you let out, right? And how much. I think it's also about toxicity of people that are toxic. I can vibe that out, and it doesn't even like
phase you.
Enter my sphere, because I don't want that kind of energy in my life. I think for me, it's really about creating that. It's like an art, it's like a canvas, right? You're just always creating and designing. Like Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, design your life. I think every aspect of your life can be intentionally created the way you want it to be, right? And that comes with making the decisions that you want to make to create that.
I love that. And I could vibe with that because I've become more intentional about like, wow, is this person inspiring for me, right? Like, do you feel? I've been using feelings more as a compass than anything cerebral, right? Like, oh, I should get along with this person because this person is into this, but really, what is your feeling on it as your compass? And I tell people, I'm like, you have no other compass other than intuition and feeling.
Right.
So it's beautiful that like you've become like very intentional about it. You mentioned your space. How important is does everyone need a creative space? And if so, why?
I think it depends on the person. I know for me, I love curating my space because we're all creatures of habit, right? We're all creatures of what's right in front of us, what's easiest. So I think if you're intentionally creating your space to guide you in the direction that you want it to be, whether that's creative inspiration, whether that's, taking time to, promote health and wellness. My whole apartment, like I make things easy for me to have access to that I know that I'm just gonna subconsciously take in. It's almost kind of like doing, so I've been doing these dopamine detoxes. And one of the ideas in there is that to be able to make it easy for yourself, you set it all up ahead of time. So it's like you're consciously creating the space so that when you're in the actual detox, you're not going after your phone because you put it in the drawer, or if you're really extreme, you've given it to somebody so that like you can't get it, they won't give it back to you until then, right? So it's like really being intentional about that and crafting the outside of it and crafting the structure, and then you have the space to play and to like let it flow on the inside. So creating the space, you know, for me visually, and having books everywhere, having, you know, my magic table, you know, just right in front of me, it's right there all the time, or having, you know, my hat stuff all just, you know, when I make hats, it's like all the tools are just sitting there, so I can just walk over and pick it up and do it. So I think, yeah, it's really about intentionally crafting the space to guide yourself into doing what you want.
No, okay, wait, so backtrack. Now, since I've known you, you've done more than a few dopamine detoxes. What the heck is a dopamine detox, and what are you detoxing from?
I actually, you know, it was really through this time, this quarantine, that really inspired it, because, you know, being home so much, I was just listening and taking in information constantly. It's like I get sucked into all these videos and, like, you know, all these rabbit holes. We'll leave it there. And constantly music and like audio books and like computer time all day, podcasts and all this stuff, and pretty soon my mind is just overloaded. And I stumbled across this YouTube video with this guy, Andrew Kirby, and he kind of outlined, he like talked about how dopamine affects the body, right? So everything we do stimulates, like releases dopamine, stimulates you. We get addicted to that every time we check our phone. Every time we're like jonesing to check our phone, we're waiting for that dopamine release. But it's not just in your phone; it's in your computer. It's you know, just TV, television. It could be, you know, it's like sexual activity, like junk foods, like just like what do you call it?
The input you're taking in, and it's like giving you the reward.
Yeah, exactly. So when you cut that stuff out, and there's 3 different levels of it that you can do. The first one's mainly just like digital, and the second one you're cutting out. All you're really doing is you can exercise, you can go on walks, you can meditate, and you can't even read books or listen to music, because music is also stimulus, and books are also stimulus. So like it really roots in an idea of stoicism. So you're just really thinking and like taking time to think and process and like contemplate. And you can journal, and then he has like one called the Time Theorist, which is like basically you just sit on a couch for 24 hours.
That sounds brutal for me.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
That's a tough one. That sounds like the silent meditation retreats in my head too, that I haven't done, but I want to. Like just being there quiet for 24 hours. Some of those are 48 hours. I can imagine what comes up, but I'll stick with the phase 1 with the meditation and journaling. But I love it. I actually would challenge all of the viewers and listeners right now. Can you set up a dopamine detox next week or the next few days? Yeah. Where basically, so let's get this straight. You turn off your phone, and if you're really addicted to it, you may have to give it to your partner or a friend. Yeah. But you turn off your phone, you put it somewhere, and then you're allowed meditation, journaling, but no music, you said?
Yeah, no music, no books.
No books.
No sex or masturbation, no tech, no junk food eating. Or stimulating foods. Yeah, so just maybe like planning out, if you're gonna do 24 hours, like what meals you'll eat that are really like nourishing versus like junk stimulating. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Really so cool. Nourishing foods, vegetables is kind of basic, you know, not really like, no stimulating foods, right, essentially. So what has that given you doing this practice, and how often do you do it? We'd like to know. I probably need to do it again. After when I was in quarantine, it was a lot easier to do it. Yeah. But 24 hours, and usually I'll just like the night before, I'll just put my phone I just put it in the drawer, and then I wake up and I don't touch anything, and then I don't do it until the next morning. So basically a full day, and what that's doing is kind of resetting your attention. Nice. Because I don't know if you probably experienced this, but like over the last like 5 or 6 years, I get this, like, I call it adult ADD, but it's just like it's like my split attention from all of like the different digital things. When, you know, and on my computer I have like 3 web browsers with like 10 tabs open each and like 10 programs open. And I'm like constantly switching back and forth. I don't know if that's the most healthy thing, but that's just kind of like the way I operate. But like, it's my attention span is like going all over the place, and then I'm checking my phone, and like, you check Instagram, and it's just like this constant like bombardment of stimulus. So I think if you can reset it, and get past, and then you go through the day and you get through that jonesing to touch your phone, you kind of start to get used to not looking at your phone. It resets your attention span.
Yeah, it's actually, I forgot what it was. I think it was 12-second attention span went down to 8, or 8 went down to 4, but our attention span has cut down so much. So absolutely I've experienced it because, a lot of my work is on my phone.
Yeah.
So then like now I'm like having to do something that requires my attention, and I was like, God, I used to be like so much more like focused and present on something. It's wild. The dopamine detox may be really helpful for us. Maybe if we even try like one day a week or once a month, even starting, just no phone, 24 hours. I remember when you were doing it, I texted you a few times and I was like, what happened to this guy?
Where'd he go?
Yeah, I was like, what happened to this guy? But yeah, I love that you do that. And I actually am inspired to do it soon, very soon.
Yeah.
It's really powerful stuff. All right, so I mentioned like creative guru because at least in my circle, you are by far the most creative guy. You have this creativity that flows through, and I speak about the importance of creativity in this, that we are creative beings. We are inherently, that is our number one superpower, to create from thought, from word, and from action, and then experience that in the material. And you're tapped into that, like, and you know it. But I think that we're given different talents in creativity, like different filters, right? Some people are way better dancers than other people, so they can create beautiful choreography. How do you inspire people? Is there any advice you can give some of us who are like, I'm kind of creative, like I used to draw when I was young, or I'm kind of creative, I like arts and crafts. How do we really tap into that powerful creative selves that we are?
Yeah, I mean, first you got to let go of the judgment and the criticism that you're giving yourself, right? Because, that's what's the most inhibiting is like, oh, I'm not this or I'm not that. I mean, creativity is about play and really creating just being intentional about like, I'm just going to play without results, without any sort of expectations. And, that's really how you kind of discover your passions and what you really enjoy is just like, are you making something that you enjoy? Are you enjoying this? Are you loving it? Go down that road, play a little bit more, or if you don't, try something new, try a new medium. I did AP art in high school, which they made us do every different medium. So like sculpture, painting, photography, graphic design, and then we kind of like figured our way. I ended up going down the graphic design path, and then I became a photographer, and then everything just kind of came full circle. But I think really it's about putting that intention and allowing yourself and giving yourself the space to play and experiment. And even like, sometimes it costs money to play, to like experiment with art, because you're like, you spend all this money on a canvas or like paint, you're like, oh, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. But you know what? Like you almost got to let that go. And just like sometimes that best art is like a happy accident. And even when I make my hats too, it's like sometimes, when I'm ideating and prototyping, like I want to try something out, but I'm like, oh man, this is like, just for the materials cost me this much. And if I screw it up, it's going to like, what do I do with it? But I got to get over that, right? And just keep experimenting. And so what? Maybe it's going to be good. Maybe it's going to be bad, but you learn. But, and I think creativity isn't just for artists. I think everyone is creative. Like some people's art is building a business. Some people's art is healing people. Some people's art is, creating content. So, it's different for everyone. And I think the idea is to activate that within yourself and be in that constant space, because when you get into flow states, right, that's also a healing state of mind because you're in the present moment. And when you're in the present moment, you're not worrying about the past or future. And when you're not worrying about the past or future, you are, in a sense, healing yourself.
Flow state is the word, man, because I think I best describe the flow state as, again, hyper present, right? No past, no future, don't have to worry about that. And there's an inspiration that is coming through you, and it's coming out like through the medium of like human being with your sensory nervous system. So you're literally expressing a deeper self that is like beautiful. And I think that we have this inherent appreciation for flow states because we know that we can tap into that. So like, watch, you like go to a ballet and you'll see like people in their flow state. They have their eyes closed and they're just doing this beautiful number. And you're just like totally encapsulated by it.
Yeah.
Or like you'll watch an artist like just painting, and you know they're just flowing through it. They're not thinking.
Yeah.
How do we tap into that more? Like, are there any exercises, or like, do we just breathe when we're doing something? Like, I want everyone to be in their flow state.
I mean, I think honestly, like doing some dopamine detoxes actually helps, because that attention span, like I'm when I'm making stuff, I'm always checking my phone. I'm like, why am I doing this? Because it's taking my attention away from the actual focus of like getting into the groove. And I think creating the space to like let yourself flow into play and like throw out the distractions it'll allow you to access that flow state a lot in a more freer state.
100%. So imagine like you're racing a car and you're on like this freeway, and then you keep having to take pit stops. You ain't never gonna enjoy that race, you know? So what you're saying is like, get out those obstacles that are stopping you, you know, like TV, phone, you know, someone who's always calling you up on the phone being like, hey, I have this other question. Just be like, I'm going on mute for an hour and a half, leave me alone, you know?
Yeah, I was just playing around with this idea of creative blocks. I talked about it on an Instagram post yesterday, but like, you know, I was associating it to like when you're out and people are on their phone all the time, and it's like, you know, when you're creating content, especially if you're a content creator, why don't you create it in blocks and then put the phone away?
That's a good idea.
You know, I think creativity and accessing flow is kind of the same way. It's like, okay, create for like an hour and put everything away. And then really kind of dive into that project, and then come back to the phone or come back to the other digital distractions and like do a time check.
I like that. Well, I'll actually put away the phone. I'll put on like some candles or like dim the light, and I'll put on like some incense, and then I'll like sit and I'll be like, all right, what am I inspired to draw or to paint or even to write? And because you have to set up the setting. Otherwise, you know, like those obstacles are going to present themselves inevitably. You're going to hear your phone ring. Someone's going to text you, right? Or you're going to get a new notification. I love that dopamine detox. Again, everyone, we should challenge ourselves to do it. Something that we were talking about, and you know, we were sitting at lunch and you mentioned these principles, okay? And I heard it, but I never went through the principles. But I think they're super powerful and like a teaching point for a lot of us, because maybe we can take some of these principles, add them to our life, and they'll inspire creativity, they'll inspire growth, they'll inspire better knowing of self. And this is all healing and health, right? Like this is tapping into deep parts of us that inevitably parallel themselves with healing and better selves. What are these principles called, and do you follow them, and what are some of your favorite ones?
Yeah, so I mean, the basics are the 7 Hermetic principles.
Hermetic, okay.
Yeah. The Hermetics are like ancient teachings that kind of span across, like, you know, you find them in all different types of religions or philosophies. Some of it like associated with Buddhism. You know, it's all kind of different across the board, but they resonate the same, and they're kind of based in the same, they're rooted in the same 7. But a couple of my favorite ones, the first one is mentalism. So everything is created from the mind. So that's kind of really what I'm all about, is like really taking the idea of creativity, starting with like your mental power and deciding and creating the intention of what you want in life. So Buddha says, as you think, the world is created around you. And that's exactly what it is. So, you know, if you think about it in the more practical terms, if you have a thought, then you take an action, and then that action produces a result, right? Whether it's you're creating art or you're creating your life, it's all the same. But it's really about taking that intention and creating with intention from the thought. So if you're living, and that goes into like healing and in the space of if we're having how many thoughts, 80,000 thoughts a day, and a majority of those thoughts are negative. And if we're creating from a negative thought space, think about what you're going to be creating in your life, right? So the idea is to kind of step back and become more aware of the thoughts that you're having that are producing the actions that you're taking to get the results. So if you're having more positive thoughts, more creative thoughts, then you can create more positive outcomes in your life.
That's mentalism.
That's mentalism.
So
yes.
and it sort of aligns with quantum physics. Like quantum physics will say that like our thoughts are intimately tied with the reality we experience, and we are actually players in what we experience. And a book I read was Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton, and then the one by Robert Lanza, I don't remember the name, it was Biocentrism.
Oh, wow.
It's the same thing. It's like the world we experience is literally the manifestation of thought. And the thought is collapsing possibility into measurable and experiential reality.
Yeah.
Which is wild. So you see it in a quantum, or like the quantum world, basically electrons, protons, neutrons, atoms, basically. They express as the same way, but macroscopically, we don't see that phenomenon happening. But I always question, does the phenomenon always happen, but macroscopically we just don't see that illusion. We just see it as for what it is, but it's always happening. And it's interesting because hearing this Hermetic principle, the mentalism aspect, I think it's so true. Like, that's why I say thoughts create what you're experiencing.
Exactly. Well, it's like, it goes back to like what we're talking about, creating your space or creating your surroundings. Like, if you think about how you're creating your surroundings, that comes through thought, right? And then everything else kind of aligns with that. The people that you let in your life, the things that you're into, the surroundings of your apartment, that all comes with creative intention. And as you create, think about that creatively, it starts to come to life, and it starts to come around you, and you start attracting those types of people into your life. You also want to be that person, right? You want to be the person that you want to attract into your life.
So, because everything is vibration. So literally the intention of living in a surrounding, let's say in nature here, I'm attracting people more of this vibration, who are more creatives, who are more like in touch with themselves in nature. Inevitably, if I lived in the middle of like Party Central, New York, what am I going to attract? Like, I may start going out a little bit more. Like decision, the intention with every decision you make is powerful. So I love the mentalism aspect. I think I've been living by that for a long time.
Yeah.
Hit me with another one.
Another one, let's see. Well, the seventh one, I guess they're not really in any particular order, but one of my other favorites is the balance of masculine and feminine energy. So we all have masculine, feminine energy within us. Obviously some people have more, and men typically have more masculine energy, women have feminine energy, but that's not always the case, especially now. Obviously we see like there's a lot more fluidity in life, and I think that this principle is really about creating a balance of the two, because I like to associate it with creating the masculine energy is like creating with intention, but then the feminine energy is kind of also allowing the space for magic to happen, and to allow space for the synchronicity to happen, and for all of that. And it goes back to I created this whole hashtag Create Your Moments a long time ago, and that had to do with it's kind of this whole principle of when I do photo shoots, I create the structure, right? I intentionally create the elements that I want in the photograph, from the location to the talent to the wardrobe to the lighting to hair and makeup, all that stuff, right? So you kind of set that up, create a direction, you craft that out intentionally in a more masculine kind of sense of the word. And then once I get on set, we just create in the moment and let it flow. And that's like the feminine energy, is like you let that magic happen. Like you get the talent in the space with all these elements, but then the talent does this gesture, or the talent moves in this way, and you just capture this like beautiful moment that you can't really, it's hard to like really intentionalize that in the beginning.
You can't just be like, maybe let this,
let's move around here. Or, the talent brings their energy, right? And they're playing in this space, and they kind of jump on this thing, or they do this, and then it creates this moment, this thing that you never even thought of. Art's the same way. Like you screw something up and you spill up paint on the canvas, but then it makes this really cool shape, and you're like, oh, there's that magic that the feminine brought in, because it was just, that's the flow aspect of it.
So tying this into life, like if you intentionally create what you can, right? Like the setting and the decisions you're going to make within that setting, and then let the rest flow, then you're balancing that masculine and feminine parts of your life, like the magic happening by just letting the flow happen.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I've actually just been thinking about this over the last week of like, we need that masculine energy to be like, I want to create this goal, and I want to do this and this, just to keep us like kind of moving forward. But the rest of it is like surrendering and letting go of the expectation of that actual result, right? And being okay with whatever happens, and letting go of like the ego attachment of that thing, of that achievement or whatever that is, and just allowing the universe to kind of create even more magic. But the less magic doesn't happen when you hold on to things so tightly.
No, never.
And you clamp it, and you shut it down, and you don't let the feminine rise up, right? If you let the feminine do its thing, life becomes really beautiful.
It does, because it flows. And in the masculine and the hypermasculine state, you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to achieve, and this is how it's going to look, and it's going to happen like this. And if it doesn't happen like this, I'm going to be anxious, angry, and I'm going to freak out, right?
Yeah.
But you're, like what you said is like, understand like what you want to create, but see that the feminine, it's not always the way that you think it's going to happen, which is why I'm like, all right, well, this is what I want to experience. I have no idea how it's going to happen, but I'm going to allow it. And releasing judgment, and by judgment I mean like good or bad, right? Like, right? Because if something bad comes up, we're like, oh my God, like this isn't what I wanted to experience. Maybe you don't understand that quote unquote bad happens, and the result of that explodes that into the good that you want to experience. You know, at the risk of being like good, bad, black and white, because it's all gray to me.
Right.
But the feminine, you just got to just be like, all right, let me create, but then surrender to the result.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is beautiful. All right, what's another principle that you like? Any other ones that really resonate with you?
I do like as above, so below. So like everything that's kind of going with what's in your inner world creates your outer world. So this really kind of dives into like creative alchemy or alchemy in general, and transmuting like your internal world into a higher vibrational state, so that what you're creating in your external world reflects that, right? So, you know, for me, like I went through a whole dark night of the soul a couple of years ago, and just was like in this super dark space, like nothing was happening. I was like, all my business like crashed. I had just gotten through a breakup and all this stuff, and you know, it took me a couple of years to really just like find all the modalities to go inward, from breath work to plant medicine to meditation to healing sessions, and doing all these different things to really get myself to a space of wholeness. And it really took everyday forward movements of like trying to transmute that energy from within my own like dark hole in my soul, wherever that was, and really like working on it to like transmute that into because I knew I want to feel whole again. Yeah. And I knew I wanted to have like a purpose and feel like that high vibration, but I was like down here, and I had to constantly, you know, I felt like I was in a hamster wheel, just like and like going nowhere, but I was actually moving somewhere because I was still making forward movement even though I didn't feel like it. And that's part of that now. So now I'm in a higher space of vibration, and I'm creating bigger results in my life again. You know, abundance is, you know, back and coming, you know, it's like surrounding my life, and you know, it just comes through all these practices. So your internal world is something to really be, you know, to work on, and to, you know, get through those anxieties, those fears, and those lower vibrational frequencies.
And I wonder if before you went through this dark period, you made a declaration of what you want to create, and then you got presented with quote unquote the bad, and you were like, oh no, I'm in this hole. But look how you've exploded and ascended since, right? So again, like the expectation that we have, maybe just surrendering and being like, because I always tell this story that I met this guy Adam at this party, and I sat and he had a very well documented YouTube breakup, and he jumped into like a bad depression. I mean, this was like his fiance, I believe.
Wow.
I sat next to him. I was like, I remember I watched some of your YouTube videos. I was like, how'd you get out of that? And he said it was just surrender. I tried everything. I tried every like spiritual practice. I had coaches, everything. He literally just said like, I can be depressed for a year, 2 years, 3 years, forever. I'm just here and I'm surrendering to it. And I think that that's the key of getting out of the hamster wheel. Right. Right. All these hamster, we just try to get out of it, and like we try to do instead of just be. Right. Like, and that being is like very powerful. Like just being like, okay, this is where I'm at and this is what I feel.
Yeah, but I mean, also what I've noticed is like to get to a space where you can let go and surrender is the work, right?
It took me 10 years, bro.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? 10 years for me to surrender. Yeah. Finally, I moved to Topanga, and I was like, all right, I got to surrender some stuff now. Yeah. 10. So.
Well, the ego is so strong, right? Like we're so fed by the external validations of the ego that, you know, especially for me, like I built this whole ego around being this like big commercial photographer, shooting celebrities and big brands and all this stuff. And when that stuff started to kind of crumble, just the way the business shifted, my business like kind of started declining. that was where my self-worth was tied,
Yeah.
and I didn't know how to let go of that. And it took years to be able to surrender to it. And it's even up until like the last couple of years, being able to surrender to the ego of what fills you in this world, and then just like being, okay, let's just see where this goes. Let's surrender and let the feminine take you where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something very important about identification, because we identify so much with our work and our jobs and even religion and every other thing, right? I think when those things come into question, our sense of selves start crumbling or shaking. And I think that let's be aware of that. Let's be aware of where our false identifications are and who we think we are. Because when you allow that feminine and masculine to flow, and when you're in that flow state, you're sort of getting in touch with who you are. And the who you are, I tell you right now, like, it took me a long time to realize that the who I am is not doctor, is not like guy, New York City, Latin man. It's all just like fun, like, labels that we have in this experience, but it's not real.
Yeah, we're just an avatar.
We're just an avatar. And the first time I heard that, I go, Avatar? I go, wait a minute, like the movie Avatar? And I was like, wait a minute, there was these characters, these people playing these characters, and I was like, holy shit.
This is so true.
I was like, am I an avatar? I was like, am I not really Christian? Am I something deeper? And that was the most powerful thing. Because you mentioned identification. Now, all of these fun labels that I have, they can leave, but it's not going to change me as a human being, who I am deep down inside. I think that's one of the most important lessons. That should be the Nick and Christian Hermetic principle. Let's make number 8. That's our principle. Like, be an avatar. Know that you're an avatar, and you're something more powerful and beautiful and magnificent.
Yeah. And optimize your avatar. Like, take
Optimize.
care of your avatar.
Sure.
Like,
For sure.
feed it good, healthy goodness. Work out,
Love openly, just
Yeah.
just give that avatar all the love in the world.
Yeah.
It ain't you. It's like, take care of your car as much as you can. Give it good gas, give it a
Exactly.
wash, tell it you love it every day.
Exactly.
It's not you, though.
Yeah.
I love that we can.
It's your meat suit,
It's the meat suit. And I think Aaron Alexander was on my show, and he talked about like a shoe, and like thinking that we're just this shoe the whole time. And then one day you take it off, and you're like, like you die, or you go into a deep meditation, or you have an experience. You take the shoe off, and you're like, holy shit, I'm not this worn out shoe. I'm actually like way more. I'm a radiant foot.
Yeah. That sounds like Aaron.
Yeah, it sounds like something Aaron would say. And I Aaron, we played off of him. But I love that. All right, so some tips before we end this. Like, we want to be more creative. If I remember correctly, dopamine detox. Major.
Dopamine detox, yeah.
Being more present, letting in the masculine, feminine, being aware of your thoughts. Anything else that you...
Yeah, allow yourself to play and experiment. And
Now, what do you mean play? Like, a lot of us are like, play what? What is play?
what does play mean to you, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's one thing to really think about. Like, maybe that's playing with a canvas. Maybe that's playing with, a camera. Maybe that's playing, experimenting and learning some things online, building new business, or, just give yourself time to kind of explore things that you enjoy. Like, follow that resonance I call it creative resonance, and that's like that kind of like inner guiding system, like where you feel like a higher vibrational feeling, or a high feeling, I should say.
When you feel high, basically, you're like, whoa.
You're like, whoa, I feel high. What is this?
Yeah.
You follow that and play more and experiment more with that, because there's something there.
Yeah, I like the definition of play, like without expectation. Just be.
Yes.
Like, kids, do they have expectation with what they're doing? No, they're just playing, And we have a mutual friend, Tracy. She has like these activations in her house that allow play. She has a trampoline. She has like this balance beam. She has like this balancing board. There's always throughout her day, like, she'll be on business calls, but she'll also like play. So she'll tap into her inner self, because that inner self, as we were kids, remember, we were super present. Shoot, I would like just play with a leaf for an hour, and there's no such thing as like paying bills, or there was no such thing as like, oh wow, like I should have done this yesterday.
Yeah.
That monkey mind is off, self-referential center. So
Yeah.
let's play more.
Play in the sandbox.
Play in the sandbox.
Well, that's another theory too, is to create a sandbox so you can play, right? Give yourself parameters and then like space to go play inside of it.
Literal sandbox or no?
I mean, if you want a real sandbox, why not?
Whatever.
If you want to go build sandcastles, go create a sandbox and build some sandcastles.
Whatever resonates with you the most. I love that, man. What a brilliant guy you are, a beautiful soul. So how do we find you, like find out what you're doing, what you're up to? Where do we go?
Yeah, you know, Instagram at Nick Onken, Nickonken is probably the best way. You can get to everything from there. My website that I just dropped is onken.co.
Onken.co. Okay, we could check you out there. I know on your Instagram we can click links to watch your beautiful photography, which is like, I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, well, damn, this is like real photography, like professional, like Michael Jordan level photography. It is beautiful, the shots that you do. Even if you're into photography, just follow that page. It's beautiful. And then if you're into the hats, which I got one of the beautiful hats that you have the Onken hat, like, and they're just, I've never seen hats like this.
Yep.
Super creative, super customized. I remember when I told you I wanted the hat, I said, listen, this is what I want, but do your creative freedom. You can't tell a creative to just like do exactly, you know. And any other projects, anything coming up for you, or are you just?
Yeah, we're relaunching the podcast.
Nice. What is it?
It's Onken Radio.
Okay.
So everything will be linkable from the Instagram.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, brother. I appreciate this conversation. I feel more creatively inspired. I know the listeners and the viewers are on fire with this, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I knew I wasn't off when I said how good this interview with Nick would be, but I really was blown away about and encouraged about dopamine detoxes. I really need to start doing it myself. I hope you learned that you can do it all yourself. He gave some awesome tips on creativity and really empowering stuff on masculine and feminine and how to keep that balance, because we all of us possess these qualities, and it's about tapping into it every single day and showing up with these beautiful, beautiful qualities. Thank you for rating. Thank you for reviewing. Thank you for subscribing. Hope you love this show. I'll see you next week.